Hi everyone, Comic Book Reviewer here. This time reviewing on issue 33 of the Image Comics of Transformers. Now, we're pretty much on issue 33, and after obviously issue 31 as well as issue 32, we are going to see where obviously Optimus and the other Autobots that obviously stayed on Earth are trying to pick up the pieces after Elita 1 took the Matrix, became Elita Prime, Megatron offering himself to Megatronus Prime, and so forth. And the cover mainly has Optimus, RC Magnus, and the other sort of Autobot outcasts ready to defend the Ark. And the story mainly starts off where after the previous issue, we see how Elita Prime returns back to her team, and we see right away that even Elita Prime mentions that, that obviously she needs a rest, and that the sort of Star Saber Ghost was also draining, which kind of implies that the Matrix is not only testing her, but to also try and help her see the risks and struggles in that of being a Prime. And we also see how Ultramanus decides to take Elita Prime back to her base, but more for transport. And they make their way back, and we see right away Blue Streak meeting up with Elita Prime's new teammates, and of course we kind of get word from basically Blue Streak about some important news, where obviously Springer and Hot Rod have returned with vast amounts of energon. And if you have read the story Void Rivals, it turns out, some characters like obviously Hot Rod, Springer, and all that have appeared in some of those issues. And we see how back on Earth, we see how Spike is writing in his journal about how obviously Carly's getting used to being the whole eyeing apprentice by RC Magnus. We see how Wheeljack works hard to rebuild Chicago, as well as setting up his lab where it's going to be where the Cybertron shard is in the middle of the ocean. And we even see how Spike has to kind of deal with everything that's happened. But even turns out, even without the Matrix, Optimus has been making a lot of questionable choices, being a bit reckless, a little impulsive, showing that not only is Optimus having to recover from the previous issue, but also elements of his old personality as Orion Pax is still there. And him saying, how are we holding up there, Beachcomber? Can't hold it much longer. Wait, it's all done. We're good. Okay, that was a good one. And we even see how even some of the other Autobots are worried about Optimus's new personality. And we see how right away Optimus is still trying to train with RC Magnus, but even without the Matrix and that, it is going to be harder for him to fight stronger opponents. But again, he still wants to kind of keep up to the challenge, despite it obviously being clear that Optimus has to realize the hard truth that he's not going to be in the same seat of power he was once in. And we see how obviously Spike still has faith in Optimus, and Optimus saying, "Oh, sorry, I didn't see you there, Spike. Yes, I'm just... I have a clear mission before me, and I worry I no longer have the power to complete it." But we kind of see how Spike obviously knows Optimus is going to have to figure this out, and we see how back on the Energon Shard at the ocean, we see how the aerial bots and Thundercracker transport him down there, and we see how obviously Wheeljack wants to find whatever technology there is. And we see how the aerial bots mention about the beauties of Earth, while Thundercracker knows the darker truths, one of which being the forces of Kobalar. And we see how after Carly completes her training, we see how Optimus wants to talk with RC. But we see right away Optimus is voicing a bit of his concern that he still has some of his memories of being a Prime, and that, yeah, he hasn't reverted fully back to Orion Pax, which heavily implies that the Matrix hasn't fully left him, and it's just there to test Elita Prime to help her understand what being a leader is. And you can even tell that even RC Magnus is furious with what Elita Prime has done, and even calls her a ungrateful zealot. But you can definitely tell, well, Elita Prime meant well, but you gotta remember, she was been in the war for millions of years. And you can definitely tell RC Madness, well justifiably angry, fails to understand that a person's path, what happened to them, and how they became that person, changed them for the worst, or made them become something too blinded by their own path. And we even see how, back on the Energon charge, we see how, obviously, from Wheeljack's work table, there's books on T-Rexes and stuff, and we see how, after trying to find what he can find, it turns out that he manages to find something, which is obviously meant to be some sparks, hinting that we're gonna get the Dinobots. Grimlock, Swoop, Snarl, and so forth. And we see how, obviously, Cliff Chomper gets more sort of amazed by Shredhead being amazed by the sort of environment, and even Cliff Chomper saying, "By Primus, you sound just like who? You, Beachhead. Sound like you." And we see how right away something happens, and we see how Cliff Chomper and Shredhead get ready for action. And we see how back on the Nemesis, we see how the Decepticons are wondering what they're going to do now, knowing that Megatron is going through his metamorphosis. But we see how, obviously, Skywarp decides to kind of toss the bodies of Jetstream, Blitzwing, and so forth, showing that, obviously, retrieving them was a bit of a waste, and obviously wondering where Starscream is. And turns out, Starscream is still alive, and that he is still going to return like a bad cold that won't go away. And this is the story. So I think my best thoughts about issue 33, it's kind of okay, kind of alright, but they're the show, obviously, more of the aftermaths from the last two issues, and seeing where Optimus is not going to have the Matrix, we're going to see Megatron go through this metamorphosis, and new problems, new issues, and new threats that are going to show up, showing that the Autobots' war with the Decepticons is not going to end a lot too soon. It's an okay story, not the best, but it still deserves a thumbs in the middle. Kind of alright, but kind of okay. So, Comic Reviewer here, signing up.